Hi, I'm David. So for this problem, we're given an equation, 9x squared plus 4y squared minus 18x plus 16y minus 119 is equal to 0. And they're asking us to identify whether this is a circle, ellipse, or hyperbola, or none of the above. So in order to figure out what this really graphs, we need to first rearrange this to fit it into the standard format for circles, ellipses, and hyperbolas. So in order to do that, we need to complete the square for the x's and the y's. So the first step to do that would be to rearrange this a bit so that we group the x's together and we group the y's together. So let's do that right now. So this becomes 9x squared minus 18x, and then I'm going to leave a little bit of space because we're going to complete the square later, plus 4y squared plus 16y, leave a little space because, again, we're going to complete the square later, minus 119 is equal to 0. Cool. So then we can look at this and factor out a 9, right? So that way we can remove this 9 from the coefficient of x. Meanwhile, for here, we can factor out a 4 since there's a common factor of 4 here. So because these two have a common factor of 9, we can factor out the 9. This becomes 9 parentheses x squared minus 2x. And again, we'll leave a little bit of space. And then here we can factor out the 4. That becomes 4 times y squared plus 4y. And then still it's going to be minus 119 equal 0. Cool. So now in order to complete the square, we need to look at the middle term, this b value. We need to take this, divide it by 2, and then square that, right? So we do negative 2 divided by 2, that's negative 1. Negative 1 squared would be positive 1, right? Again, it's negative 2 squared, again, it's negative 2 divided by 2 squared. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1 squared is 1. And so if we add this 1 to this side, we have to do it to the other side too. But remember, we're not actually adding a 1. We're adding a 1 times a 9. This 9 has to be distributed if we were to simplify it. So we're not really adding just a 1 to this side. We're adding a 1 inside of this parentheses that's being multiplied by 9. So we're actually adding 9 to both sides of the equation in order to balance it out. Now let's do the same thing and look at the y's. So again, we're taking this middle term, this b value of 4, dividing it by 2 and squaring it. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. And again, if we add 4 here, we have to add it to the other side. But it's not just 4, it's 4 times 4 because it's inside the parentheses. So 4 times 4 would be 16. Now that we have this, we can finally take these two values and complete the square. So now that becomes 9 times x minus 1, all of that squared. Meanwhile, this becomes 4 times y plus 2 squared minus 119. We can just simplify this side. 9 plus 16 is 25. Right? And we can always double check our work to make sure that we get back to this original trinomial. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative x plus x times negative 1, which is another negative x, gets us to negative 2x. And then negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Same goes over here. Y squared is y squared. Y times 2 is y2. y2 plus y2 is 4y. And then 2 times 2 is 4. Right? So we've double checked our work. All of this makes sense. So now what we want to do is we want to remove this to this side and then also divide both of these by the 9 and the 4 so that we're left with just the perfect square. So let's do this part first. We add 119 to both sides. This cancels out. And what does this become? This is 25 plus 119. That equals 144. And then meanwhile, for this side, we can just drop these down, which becomes 9 times x minus 1 squared plus 4 times y plus 2 squared, right? I'm just copying this down. Now I can divide everything by 9 and 4, right? So if I divide everything here by 9 and 4, 9 times 4 is 36, right? So we have to divide 36 on both sides. So let's do this one step at a time. First, if I divide everything here by 9, I'm dividing everything here by 9. If I divide everything here by 9, the 9s cancel out, but then that brings a 9 to this side. So there's technically going to be a 9 underneath this next part. So let me copy this down, and you'll see what I mean by that. So this part would actually be over 9, because the 9 is only canceling out the 9 here, but when you're dividing this part by the 9, you still have the 9 because it's not canceling out the 4, right? But meanwhile, we also want to divide all of this by 4. So we're dividing all of this by 4 because this 4 and this 4 will cancel out, right? Which is what leaves us with just this without the 4. But again, same goes for the x, vice versa. The 4 here is not canceling out with this 9. We still have to divide this by 4. So that means this part is going to end up being over 4. And if we divide everything on this side by 4, we have to divide everything on this side by 4. Right? So then this is now going to equal 144 over 9 times 4, which is 36. So then we can also simplify this side by just doing 144 divided by 36. 144 divided by 36 will just get us 4. Now technically, in order to bring this into the proper format for ellipses, we have to make sure this side is set equal to 1. So in order to do that, we can divide everything by 4, right? So if we divide this side by 4, we have to divide both of these sides by 4 as well. So then the final format would be x minus 1 squared all over 16 plus y plus 2 squared. All of that over 36 is equal to 1. This is the final format for graphing an ellipse because the plus symbol here tells us that this shape is going to be facing inward, whereas the hyperbola has a negative symbol here. Meanwhile, for circles, these two values would be the same for a circle, right? Because for circles, they're being stretched evenly and proportionally. It would be either 36 on both sides or 16 on both sides, etc., which would equal some sort of radius on the other side of the equation. So because of this final format, the answer to this question is that it is an ellipse. And that is how you solve this problem.